This is Jason Verney's podcast. I am Jason Verney. This is one of the couple of podcasts I do. I've currently got the Not So Korean podcast that I used to or sometimes co-host with Timothy Home. That's a podcast relating to South Korea, film, culture, important matters and loads of things. I also run the Micro Budget Filmmakers podcast because I'm a filmmaker and there's a collective that we have that are involved with that, and we interview various people from the world of filmmaking. I've also recently started, but this is nothing major. This is because I'm in Thailand. I'm sort of putting out some episodes relating to Thailand and just small snippets relating to Chiang Mai. But I will be doing on-the-fly episodes about Thailand. This particular one that you can find out there on audio and various platforms and even YouTube is called Chiang Mai Chatter. So I speak about all things Chiang Mai. This particular episode that you're listening to now, or perhaps watching on YouTube or wherever, is the FLICKS, Jason Verney's FLICKS podcast. And the reason it's called FLICKS is because it does film reviews. So that's the F, film reviews, movie reviews, life in general, when I'm traveling, when I'm sort of collaborating with people, when I'm exploring new cultures. Interviews, that's the I. The camera, because I do filmmaking, I'm a filmmaker, so that's the C, and K is for Korea, and S for sounds, and that's music, so it's F.L.I.C.K.S, and it's FLICKS. First of all, a bit of this disclaimer that I'm recording this in my recording space out here in Chiang Mai. Chiang Mai, Thailand is where I currently am. So if you hear any noise, because there is noise here in Thailand, then apologies in advance. Now I'm going to talk about this film, which is not an easy one to talk about, but it's one that I've seen recently in the cinema. Obviously it's been talked about in various ways. It's been reviewed. There's a bit of controversy behind it as well, I believe, and the director, who is also the main male star in this film, I think he's been, again, it's got nothing to do with the film itself, but there's been talks about it. Now, I didn't realise until the film had finished that the director was also the main actor. I think in real life he might even run something to do with male macho or machismo, male sort of maybe empowering men. Either way, I put that to one side. When I saw this film, I went to see it for what it was, based on maybe just the trailer, and that's how I see some films. Sometimes I don't even want to see a trailer for a film. I just want to go in completely cold, as they say. Now this film, it's called It Ends With Us, but that could have several different meanings, so I want to kind of put those potential meanings out there, and I don't want to give anything away. This is a spoiler-free platform, and so is my website, which this gets fed into, which is minimovie.com. So as well as this appearing on YouTube and my podcast platforms, it will also appear there. So it deals with domestic abuse, let's just say abuse, and this is why it's difficult to review it. I as a film, it was a very well made film, and these points that I mentioned earlier about it ends with us, that's potentially not knowing. You don't know until the end of the film or throughout the film. Maybe at some point in the film you guess what it is. For example, it could mean that it ends with the relationship that's in the present day or the more recent day in the film, that there's no more of that, perhaps no more of their love, no more of issues or problems. But it could also mean, it could be a build up to that, so a build up of what's happened in their lives, respective lives, or her life, the main character's life. And it could also mean it ends with us due to another individual, but I'm not going to give that anything away. This is how I saw it throughout the film. That meaning changed a couple of times throughout the film. So this is my best job at reviewing it as it comes to me. I saw it a couple of days ago, and it's still pretty fresh in my mind. So we meet a woman the main character, she is shown in both her current life, or as I say, recent life, but up-to-date life, present day, and then she's also shown in her past life when she was younger. And I will say, first of all, the resemblance of these characters, of the actors, is very good, and there's another character we meet later on in the film, or a little bit into the film, who's from her past, who again is not a bad likeness when we then meet that character again in later life. So I just want to say that there, sort of, kudos to the filmmaking crew who managed to get sort of the likeness of these characters. And so much so that although I had seen the poster, and that's a bit about all really in the trailer, but I couldn't remember much about the trailer, the characters' face too much. Even the poster I'd seen briefly before I went into the film, and when the scenes were shown of the younger herself going through certain bad experiences in her life regarding her mum and her dad, even then I wasn't sure, because I couldn't recollect the poster enough while I was watching the film, thinking, hang on a minute, is this younger version of herself, is that the main person? Is that who's on the poster? So now clearly, if you look at the poster, it's the woman in her later life that is the one on the poster, and she is the main character. It's just that early on in the film, that perhaps the adolescent version of her it's shown equally, proportionately with her later, her older self. Now, there is some mention, of course, I have to talk about this. I'm trying not to make this spoiler episode, but this is all integral to the plot and the film, and I can't review it without talking about some of it. So there is mention of a boy that she used to know, and he was a homeless guy, but what comes to light is that he's got his own, I'm not going to use the word baggage, I suppose, but I mean, he's got his own issues, and I don't mean personally come from him. They've come from his experience, which in some ways mirror the experiences that the younger self she's going through. So I think that, you've then got two characters who, we've got our main heroine, the woman, and this other guy that she used to know, that have both come from traumatic backgrounds, and they're trying to get through life. And obviously you've got triggers, you've got things that come up in life that prevent you from moving forwards, or that take you in a certain direction. And in this film, I think, if I remember correctly, these events and life circumstances take both these characters to Boston, or at least they meet in Boston. And I just want to mention this because it's something it's not a deep thing, but it's something I saw. There was a really brief moment where we're introduced to a pub or a bar, whatever you want to call it, and it was the Sherlock Holmes pub. Now, as far as I could see, and I know it very well, it's the one I thought it was. Bear in mind, there's different versions of pubs in the world. Was the one in Trafalgar Square, Charing Cross in London, and that's right next door to the Korean Cultural Centre. So I know it from years of going there and meeting people there. But this bar was pretty much, as far as I could see, it was set or maybe even filmed in Boston. And I looked up, I wondered if there's a Sherlock Holmes pub. As I say, they exist in different countries in Boston, but I couldn't. So if anyone out there knows if this was an identical Sherlock Holmes pub in Boston or elsewhere in North America, then let me know, because I'm really intrigued. Or did they just have some footage? Maybe they couldn't use the footage of the bar, the pub that they did film in, or film the outside of, and then they had to use some footage, because I don't think it was filmed in London. They had to use some footage from the Sherlock Holmes pub in London, or some stock footage perhaps, I don't know. So back to the story though. So these two characters will meet again in Boston, but our main heroine, she is, she's on the verge of opening up a new flower shop, a flower shop in the city, and at the same time she meets someone on the roof of a building, and this is kind of, you know, it's a beautiful setting, you know, and she meets the main guy. So he's also the director of the film, as I mentioned, but he's not the guy I talked about earlier. So he's the kind of what you would say perhaps romantic interest of our main character. Our main character is named Lily Bloom, incidentally, and she names her shop Lily Blooms, Bloom apostrophe S. So Lily Bloom's shop. Incidentally, I haven't mentioned this yet, but she's played by Blake Lively. And as I mentioned, the guy that she soon gets introduced to on this roof is Justin Baldoni, and he is playing a character called Ryle. He's one of these kind of guys who seems like a player, if you want to use that word. Seems like someone who just wants to get women in bed, and he even says that he clearly wants to get her, he wants to have sex with her basically. And she's pretty much downright refusing this. At least she's intrigued, but and it's clear that, in fact, I think when these scenes first are shown to us, I don't even know if we've actually by then seen her, the kind of throwback scenes, the flashback scenes to when she was a child or adolescent, young woman. But either way, she says, I'm not that kind of woman. I'm not going to sleep with you. That's not what I do. That's not how, you know. And so he, of course, being that kind of man, wants to challenge that and sees if he could, you know, get intimate with her. Now, certain things happen from here on in, and they, again, I'm trying not to give away spoilers, but they meet chance encounters again, partly due to the shop that she's opening, Lily Bloom's, and partly due to a mutual friend, I suppose, or a mutual relative who has, how can I say? Well, either way, introduced to. We keep meeting him again, partly due to other people that know her, and they do start a relationship. Now, he comes across as a very sort of, you don't really know actually, because when we first meet this guy, played by the director, which is Justin Baldoni, he is kicking a chair on the roof, and so he's clearly got things going on. He's clearly got some violent issues, perhaps. I say clearly, perhaps, but I mean, it's clear that he takes his anger out like that. But we then move into, you know, their relationship, and he's very nice. But bearing in mind, he's also not used to having relationships. He doesn't want to settle down, but he now thinks he's in love with her. And so these two characters, they start a life together, they even get married, but this is not before one or two incidences have occurred where she's been bruised or harmed, and we're not too sure, at least the first time, we're not too sure whether it was an accident or whether he's made it out to be an accident, and whether something bad happened, and whether, you know, he harmed her. I did wonder at this point, and I'll say this from a personal point of view, you know, and obviously I'm never one to cause a woman harm, but when a man or a woman, you know, you've got problems in life, some people are good at coping with these problems, but some people, if you're in a relationship as well, you might take the stress out, and I'm not talking violence as such, but clearly that happens. You might take it out on the people closest to you, and yeah, there is circumstances which now you could say he's suddenly a trapped man in the fact that he's used to playing the field, but it's his choice. He's chosen this path with her. He's suddenly she's bowled him over. You know, no woman has allegedly, or perhaps really bowled him over before, has never really made him love her. And at some point you do think, or in the early on, you think it's the thrill of the chase for him, because he's, you know, if you haven't got somebody, if they're saying no, he perhaps isn't used to that, so he's pushing and pushing and pushing, and then he finally gets into the relationship. And then if he's got other things that are causing him to be the way he is, this is where there's something else said about his past life. So far there's three characters I mentioned to you. They're Lily Bloom, the main woman, who we see when she's younger as well. There's this guy, Ryle, played by Jason BALDONI. You know, he's the current new love interest. But as I said earlier, we've also got this guy who's known as Atlas, as in a map, you know. And he's played by Brandon Skianar. But the reason I'm mentioning is that I mentioned earlier that both Lily and Atlas, the two that knew each other from childhood, or from early days, from being adolescents, they know each other because one was homeless, one kind of helped the other out, and they had a relationship. But as I've mentioned before, they also have trauma, because their respective families have caused turbulence and issues and violence. But as I mentioned now, when this new character who in Boston, who she meets, it turns out later on that he has had some trauma as well. I don't want to go into what that was, because again, this is meant to be in some ways a spoiler-free review, so I it wouldn't be right if I was to go into every little detail. We then see the relationship between this new guy progress, and it's got ups and downs, and that could mean downs as in being kicked down or assuming. Now clearly, as the power of the film is that the way it shows us these things happening, we are meant to know that there is some physical violence. It can't all be coincidences that all these accidents are happening. So of course friends start asking one or two questions. This has been done in films before, and it's dealt with remarkably well in this film, and that's what I would like to say. But as I mentioned, that character who was homeless, he does meet her again in Boston. So this is Atlas, and he's had some similar experience of domestic abuse happening in his old home, and when he guesses or insinuates or knows that something has been going on with her, when he sees perhaps a mark on her face, he challenges her. He's like, how you know your past, what you've witnessed. You should never be with a guy who does this to you. And he knows very well himself. So both these two people are kind of meant to be together, because these two that have known each other since their adolescence and teenage years, they've seen it firsthand themselves, and they would never, hopefully, meet somebody like that. Now, unfortunately, in life, there is a repetition that can happen to somebody. Especially, there's people I know. There could even be family members. I know there's old neighbours that I know that have been through these times, and they pick the wrong person, they pick the wrong man, and they do it time and time again. And that's not their fault, of course, but it's what life throws, these bad punches. I don't mean that in that way, but it could also mean that. So yes, we had these traumatic childhoods from these two characters, and as I say, the Justin character, BALDONI, Ryle, the one who comes into her life and sweeps her off her feet, and he's never really had relationships of meaning. He has his own things to deal with, that's clear. He's also a neurosurgeon, I think is the name of his job title, so he deals with brain surgery, and at the beginning this is kind of made light of, because she really doesn't believe that this guy that she's just met is, first of all, there is that thing with a guy who's a bit of a player, or a woman who might do similar things, is that they're not that intelligent. They're just they're so full of vanity, and they might they might have a job, but it could be a very sort of physical job as opposed to a mental job. And when she finds out that, no, he is a neurosurgeon, I mean, that is a mental job because it's dealing with brain, but it's just a moment in the film. Now, as I say, the film has, there's two parallel potential relationships that go on with her old, let's call him love, the homeless guy, Atlas, and they meet in Boston again, and it's quite considerably way through the film. But again, when we do see Atlas when he was younger, they've got some good likeness going on here with both both him and her from their early years to the older years. So we must remember, not only is this a film directed by a man, it's also based on a well-known book by Colleen Hoover. And I think what happened was Justin, the director, tried to get the rights for ages. There was problems with that. There always is problems with that, getting the rights to films. And as I say, this is dealt with in a very good way. I also had a friend of mine who mentioned this. I know someone. I even know someone out here in Thailand who's dealt with this before in their life, and it's something easy to talk about, even when it's coming up in conversation with me and this woman here. But I will say, my friend in the UK, she did find it hard at times to watch the film, but it's executed in a very subtle way, and I think that's what makes this film very well done. It's done in such a way you don't see the violence as such. You see the rage. You might not see the incident occurring. You see the leading up to it, and all these things. And it's always this thing. We all know, many of us have been in love. I don't know the ages of people listening to this right now, but we all know being in love. You can also, when you break up, whether it's from a violent situation or not, there's always your heart pulling you back. So there's a lot of that, especially towards later in the film, when they're wanting to start a family, but you're always thinking to yourself, please don't go back with him, please don't go back with him. And this is what, that's the intention. But obviously in real life, that's what you go through. You go through this struggle between, you love this person, you can't stop being with them, you can't stop thinking about the good times, and that's a big thing to take into account here. You can't stop thinking about the good times with this person. You even sometimes go back to the moments you first met, and you can forget all the violent stuff or all the terrible stuff that men do. And even without violence, the stuff that men might do psychologically, it's difficult. People remember the good times, and people forget that, and they love each other, and they know deep down inside that this monster that they also see, they see them becoming a monster. They also know that deep down they do love them. Perhaps they've never been unfaithful as well, and they know that this man, it can happen the other way around, the woman, but it's a hell of a lot more, tons and tons much more, obviously, for when a man does it to a woman. It's just, you're going to remember the good things of the relationship, and you're going to think, well, he does love me, and then there's fear of walking away as well. There's the fear of walking away from a relationship. In the best of times there is, even when there's not this kind of attachment of abuse. Yeah, I wanted to review this, but in a sensitive way, or at least as best I can, by doing this without giving too much away. But when it's, even from the trailer, it gives away quite a bit. And there's a couple of fight scenes involved regarding this new man in her life, Justin's character, but also with the guy that she used to know and now has re-met, Atlas, because he runs a restaurant. The restaurant has become well known, but so has Lily Bloom's flower shop. So there's some articles that come up and that causes friction. And yeah, I found it a very good film, and it's difficult, as a friend in the UK said, even it's difficult to say this film is to call it a great film because of the subject matter, but it's just the way it's dealt with. It's a beautifully shot film, and there's so much going for it. I know there's stuff going on behind the scenes, and I mean there's controversy perhaps with the actors and the character, maybe the author, the people that played the roles. Perhaps there's people distancing themselves a little bit from one another, but the film, it ends with us. It did end for me. It did end with a not so melancholic, but some sort of beauty in the way it was told, but again, not beauty in what's been occurring with these characters. Now, I'm sure I've forgotten something to mention there, but I've covered all the points that I really wanted to. If I think of anything else, I'll add it on to the end. So I'll leave it at that. If you want to listen to any of the other podcasts that I do, is of course Jason Verney FLICKS podcast, but I also run, which is probably the one that's I might be more well known for, is the Not So Korean podcast. We interview people from Korean culture and Korea itself. I'm now going to be visiting there on my 11th trip soon. I'm going to be jury member on the Seoul Whistler Film Festival in Korea. I've also started up on the side one or two Thailand related podcasts. One is called Chiang Mai Chatter, but I'm not really promoting it. But if you want to find it, you can find it on YouTube. You can find it on your audio platforms. So that's it. I just want to say thank you for listening. I hope this hasn't been too difficult to listen to, but I really wanted to do this. Sometimes you're just compelled to do a review of a film that's a subject matter that is difficult to deal with, but when you're compelled to actually talk about the film, the style, again, the subject matter is the thing. It needs to be highlighted, and it doesn't do a bad job of that. Okay, thanks for listening, and if anyone knows that Sherlock Holmes mystery, then please let me know. All right, okay, see you in the next one. Thanks for listening. Well, that's answered that. It seems I wasn't alone. I'm not alone with the fact of the Sherlock Holmes pub. Someone who wrote in BFI or bfi.org.uk, a certain person, has in her little list of things that aren't quite plausible in the film mentioned there are some lazy mistakes, and one of those she speaks about is that we're meant to be in Boston, and yet we are shown an establishing shot of the London pub, the Sherlock Holmes, with Green King, Bury St Edmunds clearly visible on the door. So, as I say, and it mentions a couple of other things, but as I say, I wasn't imagining it. Someone, at the bfi.org.uk, this particular reviewer has also picked up on it. That reviewer is Steph Green for Sight and Sound, or for bfi.org.uk. So it's nice to know that I wasn't imagining things. Anyway, that's the end of the review.